Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today, we'll be exploring a fascinating topic, the relationship between morality and law. As you can see from the image of the gavel, which represents justice and authority, we're going to dive into how moral principles influence legal rules and vice versa. This presentation will help us understand the complex ways in which society navigates ethics and legislation. I'm excited to take you through this analysis. Let's begin. Here, we're exploring different perspectives on what shapes our sense of morality. First, personal conscience acts as our inner guide. It's that feeling inside each of us that helps determine what feels right or wrong on an individual level. Then, we have cultural norms, which are the shared beliefs and practices within societies that influence how groups of people view moral issues. Lastly, philosophical ethics involves a more systematic and reasoned study of moral values and principles, guiding us to think critically about what is right and wrong beyond personal or cultural views. Together, these perspectives give us a comprehensive framework to understand morality from the personal to the societal and intellectual levels. Here, we're looking at the fundamental components that define law. First, legislation refers to the rules created by authorities. These rules are essential because they guide how people behave and clearly outline rights and duties within society. Next, enforcement ensures that these laws are followed. Authorities use formal mechanisms and sanctions to maintain order and make sure everyone complies with the established rules. Finally, adjudication comes into play when there are disputes. This process involves legal institutions and formal procedures to resolve conflicts fairly and justly. Together, these three elements, legislation, enforcement, and adjudication, form the backbone of our legal system. The image of the courthouse alongside sheriff's vehicles reminds us of the real-world presence of these institutions working to uphold the law. Here we see a breakdown of the key areas where law and morality intersect, highlighting their shared goals and values. Public safety takes the largest portion, making up 35%, which shows how both legal systems and moral principles prioritize protecting individuals and communities. Property rights come next at 25%, reflecting our common interest in safeguarding ownership and resources. Bodily integrity and contractual honesty are equally important at 20% each, emphasizing respect for personal autonomy and fair dealings. This overlap illustrates how legal rules often mirror our moral beliefs, reinforcing the idea that law isn't just about rules. It's also about upholding fundamental ethical standards that guide society. Here we're looking at the frequency of conflict incidents across different categories where morality and law often clash. As you can see, reproductive rights top the list with 85 incidents, closely followed by capital punishment at 80. These two areas spark the most debate and tension in public discourse. Drug use and civil disobedience also generate significant conflict, but to a lesser extent, with drug use at 50 incidents and civil disobedience at 30. This chart really highlights how certain moral issues consistently challenge legal frameworks and provoke public debate. Understanding these tensions is crucial for navigating the complex relationship between law and ethics. Here we focus on the clash between segregation laws and the push for moral justice during the civil rights movement. On one hand, segregation laws legally enforced racial separation, requiring separate facilities and perpetuating inequality. These laws institutionalized discrimination and created a system that was clearly unjust. On the other hand, major protests and moral arguments arose to challenge these unfair laws. This activism was crucial, as it led to significant legal reforms, including landmark rulings such as Brown v. Board of Education and the Civil Rights Act. The image here captures the tension of that era, showing the intense confrontations between protesters and authorities. This case study highlights how combined efforts of activism and legal change work together to dismantle systemic injustice. Here we explore the moral motivations behind whistleblowing and the various outcomes whistleblowers may face. Many whistleblowers are driven by a strong sense of duty. They feel compelled to expose wrongdoing, even when it puts them at personal risk. This creates an ethical dilemma, as they're torn between loyalty to their employer and the broader public interest. Their goal is to ensure transparency and hold organizations accountable. On the outcome side, whistleblowers can experience a range of consequences. Legal protections exist, but they differ significantly depending on the jurisdiction. Unfortunately, retaliation is still a common risk and might include job loss or harassment, despite protective laws. In some cases, whistleblowers receive public recognition for their courage. This balance between moral motivation and these varied outcomes highlights the complex nature of whistleblowing in corporate ethics. Here, we take a closer look at euthanasia and assisted suicide through three important perspectives. First, we have the moral arguments in favor. Supporters highlight the importance of personal autonomy and the relief of suffering as compelling ethical reasons to allow assistance in dying, especially under carefully regulated conditions. Next are the moral arguments against. Critics contend that aiding death compromises the value we place on life itself and raises concerns about potential abuse or pressure on vulnerable individuals. Finally, legal variance plays a significant role in how different countries handle these practices. Some places have fully legalized them, others strictly prohibit them, and some allow restricted use, reflecting a wide range of societal and legal attitudes. Taken together, these points help us understand the complex and varied landscape surrounding euthanasia and assisted suicide. Here we see a clear and steady increase in public acceptance of same-sex marriage over the past 4 decades. Starting from just 10% in 1980, acceptance grew gradually through the 1990s and early 2000s, reflecting early shifts in societal attitudes. The pace accelerates notably after 2005, with acceptance reaching 50% by 2012. From that point onward, support rises sharply, hitting 85% in 2021. This trend highlights significant cultural and legal shifts over time, showing how changing morals are closely tied to evolving laws and societal norms. It's a powerful illustration of how long-term progress in public opinion can drive and reflect broader social transformation. Here we see the impact of moral legal conflicts as reflected in various outcomes. The horizontal bar chart shows that legal reform is the most common response, accounting for 40% of cases. This indicates that when conflicts arise, lawmakers often choose to amend or create new laws to address the issues. Following that, selective enforcement occurs 30% of the time, highlighting instances where authorities might apply laws inconsistently depending on the context or moral considerations. Judicial review represents 20%, demonstrating the role courts play in interpreting and sometimes challenging existing laws. Lastly, policy reversal is the least frequent at 10%, showing that outright changes to established policies happen but are relatively rare. This data underscores how moral and legal conflicts can drive significant changes in legislation and enforcement practices. Prioritizing rights is essential. Ethics ensure that vulnerable groups are protected and that fundamental rights are always respected. Together, these principles create a strong foundation for creating laws that are not only effective, but also morally sound. As we conclude, it's important to recognize how morality and law interact in complex ways. First, they often mutually reinforce each other, working hand in hand to guide society towards fairness and order. However, there are moments when moral values and legal rules can come into conflict, creating challenging tensions that need careful attention. Resolving these differences effectively depends on open dialogue, thoughtful ethical reasoning, and flexible legal frameworks that can adapt to new situations. Just like this drawbridge, navigating the divide requires balance, careful control, and a clear pathway forward. Now, moving on to our questions and discussion section. Let's start by clarifying any concepts or definitions you might want to review. If there's anything unclear, or if you need a deeper explanation of key points, feel free to ask. Next, we'll explore some real-world cases, looking at examples and related case studies that help bring these ideas to life. Finally, we'll consider the policy implications of our findings and discuss the next steps we might take moving forward. This is a great opportunity to think about how what we've covered today could influence future actions and decisions.